you very much. Right, good morning to you. Yes, it's my privilege to speak to you for a few minutes about the future, what it is, what it has in store for us, how it might impact us, how we might respond, what it might do to your customers, to your markets, for the geographies you work in. And then we'll come full circle round to change and how we respond to change and how change dynamics work in summary at the end of this presentation. So, what do I want to talk about? I'm going to do things in fairly short order, fairly quickly. Hopefully I won't speak too quickly, give you time to digest some of the things I want to say. But I want to talk about the world. I want to talk about world economy and European economy. I want to talk about some of the new business models and how they're going to impact us and our lifestyles and preferences. And I want to talk about technology in particular and how that will change what we do and how we do it and where we do it. And then ultimately back to change. So that's what I'm going to circle around for the next while. But first of all, I want to talk about how good are we at predicting the future? How good are we at thinking the future is truly different to today? Intellectually, of course, we all get it because we're pretty smart. And very often, perhaps, we're just not really on top of what's going on. So here we have the business editor for Prentice Business Books in the United States, who said in 1957 that data processing was a fad that wouldn't last out the year. So you can see that that slight misconception of some of the impact that technology's had for the last 50 years, and it's equally set to change what we do and how we do it and how we live our lives. Massive mistake in terms of writing that one off. Let's do one more. Western Union were the #1 technology company in the world in 1876. They were the leading telegraph company in the world, and they saw the telephone as having no future. It's inherently of no use to us at all, they said, as the #1 communication firm in the world. 1,100 million telephone lines and 5.5 billion handsets. Who has a telephone in their pocket? Show of hands. There we are, they got that wrong as well, didn't they? So, even if we're in the business of understanding business, even if we're in the business of understanding technology, very often we can't see that the next technology is going to be real and have an impact. And we'll have some fun at that in a while. Let's think about something a bit technical as well. The tin can was in daily use in 1810. How long did it take for the first tin can opener to be patented? Anybody like to suggest? 2 years? 5? 50? 150? 50. Okay, 50. Not bad. It took 48 years to open the first tin. Well, it didn't take 48 years to open the first tin. What you did in 1810, if you wanted to get into something, is you took out your dagger or your sword or your axe and you hacked your way into it, and that was normal. What would you want a tin opener for? What is it? It'll never catch on. 48 years later, believe it or not, there's a website on the history of tin cans and tin can openers, if you want to follow it up. So, even things that are in daily use in front of our faces, we often can't see the implications for the future. And that's where we really need to think deeply about what impact what you're doing will have on the future, to articulate that to your customers so that it really excites them that you've got the tin can opener. Yeah, it's that extra degree of thinking that really does open up that conversation with your clients, and they'll want to buy your tin can opener. Right, that's enough of that. Over the last 5 years, which is nothing at all, never mind my 1974, starting in IT, last 5 years, effectively, YouTube started. Now the largest media channel in the world. Everything's a touch screen. Internet boom has gone berserk and changed our life and connection. We've had the Eurozone credit crisis and sovereign debt crisis, house price crashes, you name it, we've had enormous change in the last 5 years. And the question to ask yourself is, what might we have done differently if we had foreseen some of this? Okay, we can't do much about that, it's happened. But what's exciting is there's as much change coming in the next 5 years. Who's excited about that much change? Yeah. Okay, well, whether you like it or not, it's coming. The good news is, actually, we're very good at adopting change. Very good. If we changed your compensation package, you wouldn't be good at adopting change. That's that emotional quota management I think I heard mentioned by Esther earlier on. That looks hard, okay? But very often we accept change and we move on very well. What do we do in recessions? Okay, we've had the largest recession since the 1930s across most of the developed economies, not the whole world, I might add, and we've almost lost as much economic activity as in the Great Depression, in this what is called the Great Recession. So, what do? We learn to survive, which is what's going on up here. We become more efficient and cost effective. And then, of course, as we begin to come through that, we become much more agile, we repackage, we remodel, we bring out new products, which I've been hearing about this morning, we entertain new business models, and we prepare for the new world as it's reconfigured itself, which puts you in a terrific position. Everybody says they're doing this, but what I'm hearing this morning is you really are doing what the models say you should be doing at exactly this point, as the markets are ready to spend and recognize they need to do things differently. And of course, Finland is 36th best in Europe country for innovation. So there is no better place than Finland just about to manage this innovation. So, moving on. In recessions, we see differences of behavior and activity. Now, each one of these products I'm showing you here were developed and released in the Great Depression. So Motorola brought out the very first car radio in the middle of the Great Depression. 82% wiped off the share price of Wall Street, people queuing for a bowl of soup in the street. Motorola, brand new company, brought out a car radio, an automobile radio. Who would have invested your money in that working? Not one of us. It's a $9 billion corporation. We didn't see that that was still a huge demand amongst the people who had money, and they built their company. Revlon did the same for ladies' nail polish, and Kraft brought out Miracle Whip, which was the foundational product for Kraft, each a $9 billion corporation or greater today, because they saw in the downturn an opportunity to do something different. So, do we ask people? Yes, of course we do. But if you take the Akio Morita from Sony or Steve Jobs' vision of the world is you get lots of input and you make your own mind up on what you're going to deliver to your customers, which is exactly what they've been doing for a number of years. And the insight really was about convenience of access to content. And they've completely hollowed out the competition and will continue to do so until someone realizes this is what they're doing. And they've been doing it for a decade. And no single competitor ever competed with them. You don't have to be the first, you just have to be the best. And that's the point. And they just took that position and no one's competed with them. Insights are what give us the wisdom to know how to go forward. And there are plenty of global trends I could quite happily spend all day talking to you about, but you've got more important things to do. And those things will influence your customers, their personal lives, their professional lives, and their professional ambitions, and their ambitions for their companies. But there are 6 major trends, and we're going to talk to really the top 3 only this morning, but each one of those is completely transforming how markets and geographies and companies are operating over the next while. Just to come back to this point about where we are in the market, every one of these companies listed here were formed or they were transformed into the success they are today in a recession or a panic or a depression, as they used to be called. Every one of them. So Procter & Gamble, 1837, General Electric, Edison brought his companies together in 1873. Burger King was launched in 1954. There was another recession in 1957, and they brought out the Whopper. And what have they done since? The double Whopper, the Whopper with cheese, the early morning breakfast Whopper. Actually, they've been fantastically successful, opened up 11,000 restaurants, as they like to call them, and delivered a lot of money to the investors. The point is, we don't need hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of innovations. We need one that we're going to back completely and run it to be the best in the world. And this is very much what these companies did. They saw the inflection, they took their decision, they made their market, and they moved forward. Equally, in the last recession around 2000, mostly US-centric, these three technologies came of age, and they transformed the cost base for database software, for operating systems, for the use of redundant PCs, either Linux operating system, which is what happened there. And of course, Google ad dollars came of age around 2000, and we know the history of Google since. So transformation is at inflection points, at changes of when markets and customers behave differently. So we've done that for a moment. I want to park that. I want to talk about people now. Most of you are people, yeah? Okay, well, most of you are people. I imagine you are people. In the planet Earth, its history of populations looks something like this. Nothing happened for about 2 or 3 million years. Then we get to 1955 and we stop dying. So this is quite good news, yeah? So 1955, we stop dying, which is quite a dramatic graph. This is the sort of graph that I imagine you're being asked to sign up to for your sales quotas. But this is equally real and achievable. This is what's happening. Let's look at it slightly differently. In the developed world, that's the little green bit at the bottom, that's the change in population of the Earth. The purple population is where everybody else is, and they're appearing for the first time. So we have completely transformed the axis of where the activity and the capacity is on planet for both consumption and for business activity. Now we know this from the software industry in India, and we know this from all the Chinese influence we're seeing, but this is not just restricted to those two mega countries. It's completely changed the map of how the Earth will work. The consequence of that, to some extent at least, is that we have aging populations. You know about this. We had a couple of 100 million over 60s in 1950. By today or thereabouts, we've got about 700 million people over 60. And in the next 50 years, we'll have 1.8 billion people over 60. So we're changing again the balance of the people in our society, the people who will be working there. And by the way, that 1.8 billion people is you. You can do the sums yourself later on, but if you work out how long you're going to live and when 2050 is, it's you. You're that over 50s, slowing up the motorways, getting in the way at checkouts, telling people you can't use the new technology, you just don't understand it. Yeah? You're going to be that generation. So please, please, please don't behave like 60s, 70s, 80s are today. And that's not fair to them either. So there we are. Over 60s, over 70s don't really matter because it's a different game altogether. The latest research for men, and men tend to die a little bit earlier than women still in most developed countries, is that men should last to about 90 or 97 if you were born about 85. So look, if you thought you were going to die at 80, you've got another 10, 15, 20 years on your life, so you can relax. You've got time to get things done. We don't need to be in such a rush. I can be here 2 hours, because what difference will it make? You've got 20 years more to your life. Okay, if you've got access to good medicine and you live in a relatively safe country and undertake a relatively safe occupation, which most of you do, then you'll live to about 120 now. Okay, so you've gone from 80 maybe expectation to maybe 90 to 97 to now about 120. And most of you should probably live to about 120. Well, okay. Okay, you're skeptical. I knew you would be. I just knew you would be skeptical. I've worked in Finland quite a few times, actually. You're far too clever. Look, in Finland in 1802, you're supposed to die by 30. Hands up those over 30. Right, you're dead. Okay, that's the reality. 200 years ago. Today, it's around about 80 and heading north, yeah? It's around about 80. So, in 200 years, it's gone up about 2.5 times. So in the next 200 years, if it carries on at the same rate, it will be life expectancy of 200. Yeah? Okay, well that's just using history. There's no invention for new medicine, new remedies, new working styles, new welfare systems, new health, nutraceuticals. There is a massive change in terms of the ability of technology and science to keep you alive, and that just uses old thinking to project forward. So you're going to live to 200. So I was wrong about 120, right? You're going to live to 200. Yeah? So you can put off saving for your pension until you're about 140, or you can put all of your money aside and start your pension when you're about 60 and be poor. Okay? Well, actually, if you ask people who think about life extension, and by the way, this is going to happen to all your customers, they're all going to think the same way, really you should be able to live to 500 years or 1,000. Now you really don't believe it. Okay, and the latest thinking is that the first person to live to 1,000 is probably already 60 today. Now how are you going to live your life? What sort of thinking is going to go on in your head? And that's the point, is this is about to become very common currency and will transform our lifestyles, and it will. So, or we get fat and die young. I'm sorry about that, but there we are. That's the alternative dimension that's happening for a lot of folk in the world, that about 10% of us will be obese and die young. Right, that's a little bit about people, and there's those degrees of changes happening in many, many fields, and I've just dealt with aging and one slide on obesity. It's a very, very interesting world, and as most of you are people, I thought most of you would be interested to know how long you're going to live. What about the economy? The nice thing is that HSBC and Standard Chartered Bank and many of the global banks are saying that roughly the world economy will multiply threefold in the next 40 years. And to make that slightly sooner, double in economic activity in the next 2 decades. World economic activity is around $63 trillion US. So if you just think about it, we're dealing with a 3% growth forecast now. That's around about 2 trillion new money to shoot at. So if your quota isn't at least 2 trillion, then you're underperforming. There's huge new money being developed in new economies by new players all the time, and that's what's being factored in. The G7, by way of an example, economies are being caught up by the emerging 7, and they'll overtake by about 2019 in terms of economic activity, and by 2050 they'll have doubled. So what does that mean in terms of people and consumption and new businesses operating in the world? Well, essentially, with 70 million new middle-class spending consumers in the world every year, we're seeing a shift from the European Union, United States-centric markets significantly towards Asian markets. And if you just look at that chart, we're going from somewhere around 5% in 2005 to around about 25% of Asian economic activity by around about now. And by 2030, it's 60% of world economic activity. So those clients of yours that are active in those markets will grow fastest. So as you chase business, largest isn't always the best. The ambitious small, medium enterprises as well, which I know you're now targeting, that are facing towards the east in some fashion or another, are much more likely to grow faster and take you with them on their journey of increased transactions. Very fast growth, need help. What do you do if you're in a fast growth company? You do not have beauty parades from people selling you products. If someone appears to be able to do it, you buy it and engage. You haven't got time to go through a massive process. So presenting that video, you'll probably sell from the video straight to your website. Those sorts of people just need to engage. They don't even want to talk about it. Big change. 3.8 trillion market for software delivered one way or the other. Increasingly, software as a service or remote delivery is the preferred method for major companies as well as the SME and SMB markets. But look at software's 6.4% growth, but 3.8 trillion market to shoot at is no bad thing. Even if it was smaller than before, it's a huge market, and software is seen to do well because it delivers efficiency and effectiveness savings to companies that now need them more than ever. So downturns shouldn't apply in many ways to what you are offering. If you look at NASCOM, I'm talking about Indian software market growing 16 to 18%, and that's a revised downward figure. So they can see the projection of being able to bring business back home from over in India. Analytics, big data, of course, we could have fun talking about that. Massive opportunity in business intelligence around all the sort of transactions that you deal with. And of course, smart systems in the cloud are where everybody's money is following today. What's it like in the European Union, just to bring it closer to home for a moment? Well, number one is that it's not going to be a great year in 2012. The economists, in terms of the economy, are talking about a downturn, possibly a recession across the Eurozone, as opposed to the United States and other parts of the world, obviously. But nonetheless, as I said to you before, people are looking for efficiency and cost-effectiveness savings, and therefore that's a fantastic opportunity for what you're saying. In targeting the SMEs, this is terrific. You know, you've got 99.8% of all companies in Europe are SMEs. Who's in the SME team here? You've got it easy, it's everyone. Now, I know that's not true. It's a new ground for you, and it's going to be challenging. I know, and I get all that. It's very volatile, but it's very exciting. It's where all the growth, where the innovation is, where the R&D is in Europe. Everything that goes on of any matter about bringing the European Union back to recovery is in there. And the European Union commissioners have finally got it. And there are now initiatives called Think Small First from the EU to try and help small companies grow and be effective, because that's where the job creation will come from. That's where the innovation will come from. That's where the EU will get out of its difficulties, not the big corporates. We love the big corporates. They deliver lots of value to us, but the SMEs are where we're going to get growth and innovation. So we've done the world, we've done people, we're cracking through this at a fair pace. Now let's do business models. I'm only going to talk about a few. I'm sure we could discuss many. Number one is, over this next decade, and started already to a major degree, are many major changes to the way that business is done in the world. Ethics is shaping how we behave around the world, and has done for some time. Talent acquisition before the recession was the biggest issue on everyone's agenda. During the downturn, it's gone away slightly. When we get going as a world economy, then we're going to have exactly the same issues. Talent acquisition and retention is going to be the number one issue on companies' lists, as they need to grow and use those people to deliver services that we know our customers want. I could talk to all those. I'm not going to. Hopefully you've read them. But each one of those is changing the way that businesses operate quite dramatically. If you look about what McKinsey said about this a year ago, and it's really quite profound, is that companies that are going to be successful in the future will have to accelerate productivity. There is no choice. In a high-cost environment such as the European Union, North America, developed economies, we have to become much more efficient. And there are limits to the degree of efficiency. Sometimes we just have to do things differently to reduce the cost. And therefore, cloud and remote services and third-party services and BPO and BPU are becoming much more attractive to organizations as they look to find new ways of being much more effective. And of course, as the world's economy shifts towards Asia, product launch markets tend to become Asian. So if we're used to American cars, I don't know if you've noticed, but American cars have very large seats, which is jolly handy for some of us. If you've been to Asia, you'll notice that they're not necessarily all that big. If that is the launch market, what size will seats be in cars in the future? And it's very small things like that that are going to make a huge difference over time as launch markets increasingly become Eastern focused. So, what's changing and why is it changing? First of all, we're reconfiguring the relationships between suppliers and distributors and the markets themselves and customers, and the power has increasingly moved towards the customers away from the suppliers over time. It's easier for new entrants to enter markets, and substitutes to existing practices are myriad. There are many forms of new substitutes for doing processes. We'll mix different components from different processes to build new solutions. In fact, that's your strength, I would guess. And innovation has finally become a key differentiator because service and quality service is expected at standard. So it really becomes quite interesting, the markets moving forward. And of course, scalability, as was mentioned earlier on today, becomes a key factor. So I don't actually absorb cost I don't need yet in my business. How do we deliver that? How can we start thinking about how do you deliver that sort of change in your clients' markets, your customers' markets? Well, look, 80% of executives in a study recently said that collaboration across the business is key to the success. Across the silos, across the geography, across the professions and the skills, sharing experience across the business rapidly to get those stories out to the market, to get those effectiveness transferred across the business. And 90% are saying that innovation and growth are more important now than cost savings. So it becomes quite important that we're aligned with those values of senior executives in our client organizations. So, social networks, very badly named, sound like it's fun to play with. Social networks are nothing to do with that anymore whatsoever. It's not about chatting with your friends. That might be the version you use at home. It's all about doing business differently. For a long time, it's been a way of recruiting smart talent from around the world, making contact with people, using tools like LinkedIn, but that's no means the only one. We get insights in terms of our client aspirations and our market aspirations and what innovation we can bring by using our social tools. How many of you use, for example, something like LinkedIn, a business social network? How many of you have regularly asked questions of your network to make you more successful in your job? Your name is? Sila. Ask Sila. Everybody come and ask Sila in the lunch break. Because as far as I could see, she's the only person who put her hand up. That's the point of social networks. That is why you're in a business network. Yeah? It's not to maintain business card transactions so people keep up to date. It's so people who have said they want to be connected with you can give you some help. That's exactly, if you ask your network a question, you don't want to show that you're stupid, of course, so you've got to word your question very carefully. But if you ask a question, you'll be surprised what feedback you get. Often enormous wisdom. Obviously, we need to protect the company's reputation, but a source of enormous insight and wisdom very rapidly. And hopefully you've read the rest of that while I'm talking. The external network, whether it's a supplier, a distributor, a customer, an analyst community, some commentators, your own network of followers in your organization, provide enormous impact these days of your intellectual property in terms of your insight, and in fact your value of your business is provided very often more from outside people than inside people. So managing those networks, nurturing those networks, engaging with those networks is becoming valuable and vital for organizations who want to be nimble and effective going forward. So they're not passive. I think I heard that word this morning, be proactive. Be proactive with your networks to elicit every single piece of advantage you can. A reference, a comment, a like on Facebook will make a huge difference to your brand, your reputation, and people who find you will think the better of you if others are prepared to stand up and talk about you positively. So, the other thing is it's going to change management processes. If you think about our traditional ways, we have meetings, we have phone calls, we have conference calls, we have video conferencing perhaps, and we have maybe email. Do you have email in your company? Do we like email? Well, there's nothing wrong with email. We tend to be a little bit abusive with it sometimes. By Monday, give me your 3-year forecast. It's important. Give it to me now. No, I'm joking. But, you know, it's not the tool, it's how we use it. But what's exciting about social tools is that we have the opportunity for people we trust to raise issues and have anybody who's allowed to see that commentate and give a response. Social tools are about changing the way we run management processes. They can be quicker, more effective, more surprising than somebody who's allowed access but you wouldn't normally have included can provide you with some insight that you wouldn't otherwise have got. It's quite a quick way of moving forward. It's not linear. It is the replacement for email. Whether it's better or not, we'll wait and see. Okay, and of course, for those who are marketers in the room, we'll know that managing your word of mouth online will deliver real value to the bottom line, in fact the top line as well, in terms of sales and boosting sales and unlocking growth. So it's quite an important area to go to, and I'm sure you're already doing that, tweeting and blogging and doing those good things. Or we change the model completely in terms of support calls. We no longer use people, we let people discuss their own problems in forums, and they come to those conclusions quicker perhaps than we can even help them, especially if we participate in those forums. So we're changing the models quite dramatically on how we work. Equally, we're bundling our products, and I heard this morning it's product with services to different degrees, because remember what I said about downturns? We change the packaging and the innovation of the product, and we deliver it to a new market that has different expectations than the one that we went in. They are different markets, different people, different expectations, and when you turn up like Apple and Akio Morita from Sony with something that people have said they want, and you present it to them, they're going to love it. Yeah? They're going to love the fact that you're helping them do what they want to do, and that becomes very powerful. Equally, there's the opportunity for upselling, and I see you've got huge amounts of that in terms of the graduation of products and service sets that the people can engage with. Terrific way to go. And of course, freemium is the other way. Give some of it away, let others come to it. So maybe if you can get a few of those European Union companies, sorry, could you go back one? Maybe if you get those, if you go, think of a freemium model, there's 20 million SMEs in the EU. There's actually 22 million if you include the financial services ones. There's 23 million small and medium businesses in the United States, so that's 45 million companies. If you gave a base product away to 45 million companies, how quickly would people come to your doorstep and ask to engage with you? So give away 45 million, sorry about this, I've just made this up. This, by the way, is not policy. I'm not a policy person here. But if we give away something that's fundamentally basic but works brilliantly, people will upgrade on top. And you don't need a massive percentage of 45 million companies upgrading to make a huge difference. Freemium is incredibly exciting, and every financial services person in the room will be cringing and hating me for even raising this today. Sorry about that. There we are. Or we make markets. We become the extreme player, and we do exactly what I've just said. As Kindle did against Amazon, the yellow line's Amazon's growth in book sales, and Kindle's book sales is the orange one. Both routes are terrific and energizing and exciting and valuable and profitable, and we can choose which way to go. So, is it all about us? Or is it really now increasingly all about them? It's all about our customers. As we increasingly move towards services, as I heard mentioned this morning, it's not about what we can sell them, it's about what they are trying to achieve and how we help them achieve it. And by the way, it happens to include some components of what we have. The faster we can move to that mentality, the faster we can get on the same page strategically as our customers, and in markets, if we're dealing with the SME community, the faster they will recognize how we can help them be successful. So, managing services as a profit center is increasingly what smart service companies are doing as they've moved away from product. So it becomes an entity in itself. It may be bundled or not, and increasingly offers services to consumers and customers alike on a competitive basis beyond even supporting the product set, which is the ultimate goal of services orientation. We gather around problems, we provide solutions, and we bring our products to bear as appropriate. Quite a different mindset. Jack Welch noticed that back in 1995 when he took the company over, and he moved it from, he doubled the services by 2000 to 17 billion, and by 30 billion, 164 billion revenues of services, two-thirds of it in 2007, and it's their biggest profit center going forward. So a complete transformation of language and behavior internally, because services sounds a bit like product, service, services and product. It sounds similar. They are completely different language sets, mindset, mentality when we go to the market. I use Unisys, which I very rarely reference, my old company, but I would say here they've gone the whole way at last after a long journey moving from mainframes to smaller products, to software, to solutions, to services that were really product delivery services, to finally service orientation and deliver everything as a service. And this is the road that actually gets you closer to clients, closer to their strategies, closer to what they want to achieve. And of course, it's changing the work we do. We've automated so many manual jobs over the last 40, 50 years with equipment and technology. Clerical tasks we've replaced, and we've heard even more efficient clerical operations being delivered by what you do today, and managerial and increasingly professional roles are being replaced or supported by more and more technology. So it's becoming really interesting to look at jobs of the future, which is something we were doing with the British government last Tuesday, trying to look at what will jobs really look like in 10 and 20 years' time. They will be massively different today. Our human interactions will be incredibly valuable and incredibly rich when we come to have them. There'll be so much automation that'll do the general day-to-day stuff of professional and managerial operatives in the world. This doesn't mean to say we're all unemployed, because in Europe, by 2050, we're short 68 million workers. Yeah? Now, obviously, different countries are having different problems with moving the retirement age. Some countries, people get upset at having to retire after 60. The EU has said average retirement age in the EU needs to be 70. That's going to be fun getting that through, isn't it? You're going to retire when you're 200. There we are then. So you might as well settle down to a nice career at Basware and ride this curve for the next 100 years. Okay, we've got to think long term about these things, you know. Get that Kindle curve going and be the supplier of choice for 100 million SMEs in the world. And why not? Okay, big change in there. We've just touched one or two of the little changes that might happen in the business landscape. And I've got 20 minutes to do 2 more segments. Okay, how are you doing? All right? Okay, technology, here we go. I want to talk about some of these technologies to some degree. I'm going to go quite quick, but this is something I want to dwell on. I've noticed this over the last 30 years of IT. I've been a project manager, I've been a systems analyst, I've been a leader of divisions of large corporates in IT, I've been on the client side, and one thing I've noticed that when we have new technology, we do things differently. Yeah, example, once we had a PC and we sat at the desk. Then I was given a laptop and I sat at the desk. I'm doing things differently, I've got a laptop. And then eventually I go, duh, why would I travel in and out? I'll take that wherever I go, and increasingly I'll be allowed to work from home, and people will increasingly trust me to work from home, and I get the work done, and I'll go and sit with the client, and I'll even video conference my client, maybe. Who video conferences with your clients? Who uses desk-based video conferencing, videoing clients? Well, more of you need to do that. It's much more efficient. People like it. There's a degree of intimacy if you get the hang of it, by the way. Right, first thing, we do things differently, then we do different things. And this is what we've got to think about when we're bringing new products out. What different things will our clients and customers actually be able to do as a consequence of your new product? Not just do it more efficiently. What will they do differently? What can they do differently? How can they attract staff and talent to stay with them better? How can they become more effective in their markets? Because what you've brought them is a better product to do their job, yeah? It's going to be really interesting as we go through that next cycle of what can we do differently. Okay, we're all looking for much more consumerization of IT in corporates because most people have better technology at home than they have at corporates now. So most corporates are beginning to give up bit by bit and allow people to bring their own technology in and support it. It's a slow process, but gradually we're getting there. So we want it to be simple but scalable and sexy, if you pardon that expression, but we also want it to be enterprise quality, secure and stable. And therefore what you're offering, again, fits that perfectly, that whole issue. I didn't put that there just to be polite to you, but that's exactly what folk are looking at going forward in terms of the right way of looking at B2B. B2B is the same as B2C mentally, emotionally. It's all person to person now. It's not B2C or B2B anymore. It's merging around person to person in terms of reputation, in terms of interaction with technology. How you put contracts together and how you build an economic relationship, of course, is business to business. But actually it's about individuals' sense of response to the products and services. I put a slide up here about what the analysts are saying, and effectively all I want to take from this is, look, mobile SaaS is going from 1.2 to 3.7 billion in 5 years, 300% growth. Cloud computing is going from 40 billion to 241. That's 600% increase. You take global cloud IP traffic, it's going to be up 1,200% in the next 5 years. So every one of the growth factors that Forrester and Gartner and IDC and Data Monitor are talking about are massive percentages growth. And riding that growth is an exciting place to be. So let's take it more local. In the France, Netherlands, Italy, we've got around a third of businesses now looking strategically at taking up cloud applications and services. And even in the SME community, I picked out these figures, which are around about a third of companies of all varying sizes of SME, obviously slightly larger than the micro enterprises, about a third are taking up those sorts of services. So it's a huge opportunity across all markets. What's driving that? And this is the last shout for technology as it is today, because then we run out of the capacity to miniaturize and bring processing power together. But over the next 8 years, 5-6 years, 500 times more power at the center. So we need to liberate our thinking in terms of having 1 gigahertz broadband networks and similar sort of speed of wireless networks, and 500 times more power at the center, what sort of things are customers going to want with that sort of lack of latency, that sort of power of service going forward? And of course, one of the things is going to be instant analytics across everything that's going on your network in any way, shape, or form, with a myriad set of services that only you can offer because you're the leader with 45 million SME companies all using your software. So, what else? Oh yes, the United Nations last year announced that the internet and access to the internet was a human right, and to deny it is a human rights violation. Did you notice that? Almost went nowhere. It's incredible. We've just flipped from nice to have to it's a human right like oxygen and freedom of expression, etc., to have access to the internet. Right now, there's about 2 billion people, which is almost no one online. You know, it's noisy on the internet now, but there's almost no one there now. O3 Breathe project is bringing 3 billion more people online. Terrific. We're going to get to 5 billion people in the next 3 or 4 years as they put up 18 satellites already, and they're nearly all pointed at parts of the developing world. And those people in those economies will go straight to wireless and satellites, and they're not simply going to buy and be consumers, they're waiting to sell to the world. So there's another few 100 million small micro enterprises waiting to do business coming online in the next 2, 3, 4 years' time. Again, big change. The data across these networks has gone up 400% in 4 years. Tremendous amount of activity and knowledge and information, and we're moving from 1 zettabyte around 2015 to 35 zettabytes. And that's, of course, one with 21 noughts after it. So 44 times increase in volume of activity across the internet in the next few years by 2020. That's amazing, isn't it? I mean, what we've got now is almost nothing. We're going from 2 to 5 billion people with 44 times the amount of traffic, and that's the world our cloud is going to inhabit. And mobile's the story, isn't it, going forward, one way or another. And this is a prototype Nokia device. It could be anything. They're all changing shape because we're running out of the raw materials for LCD screens, so we know we won't be using those for many more years. We've got about 4 years worth of indium left. So that's the end of solid type screens like these. Nice, there they are. So massive increase in speed and performance and capacity and the ability to engage in business activity. And of course, the Arcash tablet is coming out this month in India for students at University in India at $35 US. Yeah? It's a gigabyte of memory on board. It's a version 2. Have you ever heard of it? If there are any spare, you can buy one for $70 US, but there will be none spare. They're making 2 million and they will all be gobbled up. Now, imagine the world where it's $35 to buy a laptop like that, a tablet like that. And you're in the cloud, so all your data is protected. Are you going to worry about it like on the beach? You'll leave it on the beach, go swimming. If it's stolen, okay, what a shame. Get the other one out the hotel. Or you go to the stand, it's ice cream, hot dogs, Arcash tablets, $35. But actually what happens when technology gets that cheap? It's given away. Yeah, it's given away, and folks find an advantage from software or services by giving away the technology. So give away a bunch of those to 3 billion people just coming online, and you've got yourself a new market. Of course, 3 billion of those would be quite hard to provide. But nonetheless, it's a game-changing level of price on mobile technology. We haven't seen the half of what's coming yet. Of course, we're going to be surrounded with technology that's all got an IP address, and it knows where it is because it's GPS, and it knows who it's next to, and it can probably read your diary, so it knows why you're here, and probably knows where you're going next, and it knows what you bought because we're going to buy using our small devices, and universities are already using you as a sort of human lab to monitor progress, and they are in Finland already, I can tell you that. So doing social experiments on how people are moving about, identifying you personally by the gait of your walk, identifying your patterns of behavior so we can target you when you're resting, when you're with friends, when you're at work, when you're in business meetings, by looking at your diary. People who are putting smart cities together are using that knowledge to lay on transport and communications and help you move around smart cities that much more efficiently and effectively. So unless you take the battery out, you are already engaging in this new world of knowledge with all these devices which help bring insight into how the world works. It's not all bad news, It's quite good news if you're prepared to embrace a world of information. Of course, we're going to use video conferencing, but we're going to use it on every device in every way we possibly can, and we need to start talking to our clients. I've just finished a tour with a major company around Europe, and we had their clients, and we had their providers and their sales force in the room, and at every meeting, people signed up to do more video conferencing using tools like Skype. They're now having more frequent interactions, which take less time to get there, but you're in the room more often than not because you're easy to get hold of, and it's a more personal connection if you use those sort of video tools than a telephone. It's a different sort of discussion, yeah? Okay, Shazam, we're going to get rid of the keyboard. I heard about keyboard enablement and shift. That's great, but we're going to wave at it. We're going to use eye movement. Who's got Siri on their iPhone? You? Are you not allowed iPhones? Anyway, he's got an iPhone with Siri on. Go and talk to him in the break. Sometimes it's really cool. Sometimes it's deeply annoying, but sometimes it's deeply cool. And one of the facts I needed for this, I simply got my iPhone out, asked Siri, got the number straight away, put the phone away. And my 10-year-old son was standing next to me, he said, that's cool. So, you know, we're going to get used to access to information by verbal, by gesture, by eye movement in the future. And that's also where we're going to go, without a shadow of a doubt. We're going to use animated avatars increasingly to replace our call agents and our service agents, because they're sitting on top of knowledge bases being driven by artificial intelligence, which by about 2020, 2023 is going to be able to replace most human-like interaction if you want it to. So, complete change of technology. This one, by the way, already works, and it uses the camera to detect facial expression changes and voice detection software that detects tone of voice change so that it can respond accordingly. Really interesting software. And of course, with the cult of celebrity, you can talk to anybody you like and make it quite an enjoyable experience. This is Duffy, apparently. She's a singer. So, there we are. By 2015, everything will be three-dimensional. 3 years away. If we want it to be, it'll be three-dimensional, because a personal experience of 3D is easy on a device. Multi-shared is not so easy. And by 2020, haptic interfaces will make it feel our interaction is real, physically real. If you've ever tried those out, they're really quite creepy. It does beg the issue about what people are going to do with it, which is slightly troubling. But nonetheless, it is going to change the sort of engagement we have over the internet. Ultimately, of course, we become virtual, where we'll immerse ourselves in rich virtual worlds, where we can have conferences and have real people in the room and virtual people attending and clients and customers coming and going, taking part in demonstrations. They can float in the air if they want to. This is obviously where we're going. Not necessarily the 60s and 70-year-olds who find that a little bit off-putting, but some of the perhaps younger people, and it really is an exciting world. And there, already, we've worked out how to use brain waves to interact with systems. That's beginning to work already. So, there we are, new interfaces we're going to get used to. And finally, of course, the virtual worlds and the real worlds are going to swap over. And I put some examples up there, things that are already in use. And this one over here on the far left of the screen is somebody on a slide in Israel, coming down the slide with a hand device on there, a little rubber device on their arm, which has already been registered with their Facebook page. And when they hit it on the way down, it updates on Facebook that they like that slide. So when they finish with a demonstration with you, they should walk out and go, like, update your Facebook page. We're going to blend real world and virtual world. Real world, we can perhaps get 200 people in a room. Virtual world, we can get 7 billion people in the room. They might not all want to come, but we can get them in. Okay, starts getting interesting. This is a hologram, the one on the right. You can see that by the light, he has no feet. Otherwise, they're 3D, they're color, they're interactive, already here now. This is a robot who walks and talks, speaks 4 languages, has facial expression recognition and voice change recognition, and costs $5,000 US a week to rent, and you can buy her outright for $250,000 today. So be careful, get smart out there, otherwise you get replaced. It's get smart or get replaced. Or you can say, don't like Actroid 1, I'll have Shakira 2. Well, I made her up, I just thought she was prettier. And of course, you can have a Clooney 1. So the point is we can blend these new communications channels, which is what they are, and we will use them as such very easily as we move forward. And we're bound to engage with them, because why wouldn't you want to? And of course, in B2B, face-to-face is always the most important to close the sale, to introduce each other to one another. And here you can have Hiroshi Ishiguro 2.0 or the real one. And that again is a very advanced walking, talking, thinking, engaging robot. And there's many, many in Japan. And they've invented them so they can look after their old parents because they don't want to do it, which is fine, and that's okay. So the side benefit is that we all get lots of robots that are quite smart. Right, so there's lots changing, yeah? I've just touched a tiny part of the world we're inhabiting over the next 5 and 10 and 15 years. Very exciting. So organizationally, how do we behave very often? Very often, we have a sort of management culture, and I'm not saying that's your culture, but very often in business, that there is a right way of doing things, and I am a manager, and I will show you the right way of doing it. Now, I heard the opposite of that today. I heard about empowerment, and put your hand up if things are uncertain going forward. And authority is aligned with empowerment. Terrific. So the role of management traditionally is to ensure predictability and stability, which is great. If you want change, however, it's about leadership. It's about going to that new place. It's about going to that new vision 70 to 90% of the time, and only 10 to 30% or thereabouts is about management. You switch things round, as you're all being asked to do, to take on new behaviors, to demonstrate to the rest of the company and the organization and your clients and your market that you're doing different things. So how can you encapsulate that? So we organize for performance and customer satisfaction, which is terrific, yeah? That doesn't have to go away. Please don't get confused. I'm not saying any of that goes away, but if you want change to happen, and I'm probably going to get shot now, you need to disorganize for renewal and innovation. And that's really what you're doing. You're disorganizing by doing things differently. It isn't the same old way. If it feels like the same old way, we're not changing. So the more discomfort, the more new things you're being asked to take on, the more likelihood is you are changing. Yeah? So that's good. Change is good. Remember all those companies in the downturn? They changed and became massive organizations. You know, when you can say you were here in the room when there were just 200, and now the company has these meetings as town hall meetings every week with the local branch of your company, you know, you can say you were there at the beginning when we behaved differently. We changed what we did. We rode the cloud. We rode that massive business hike. We rode that massive population surge. We rode those new SMEs driving change in their markets, and we rode that to success. And successful leaders articulate the change. They articulate where we're going. And then they leave it to the smart people in the organization to work it out how to get there. And that may be where you're at with your various side meetings going on today and tomorrow, and I'm sure into the future, which is that's the vision, that's where we're going, let's work out how we contribute to that to get there. So just a couple of slides to go, you'll be pleased to know. We've done this for quite a few years now, and for many years we decided we didn't want to help companies change. We'd tell them what's changing, then leave. And our clients kept coming back and saying, please help us change, having now told us this change. And we said, okay, and over 2 years we designed a very simple tool. One is this model, and basically it says the first thing is vision. Many, many companies, and you need to check your competition out because this is really interesting, have a very poor vision. They have a vision that their people cannot even articulate. And I've worked with top 3 or 4 in their markets worldwide with the boards of directors who don't even remember what their vision statement is. Yeah? And then when you ask them, is it real? Is it driving the company? Yes. So you don't say it, you think, well, you don't even know what it is. Find out for your competition. Go look them up and see what their vision is. And see if they're behaving according to it, because it's very powerful in the market right now. But of course we need insights as to what's happening, which is what you've gathered together, and then you make your own opinion, which is how we define foresight. Your foresight of what's likely to happen, and therefore that vision is still applicable today because we're basing it on this evidence of what's changing. It's a very powerful and compelling argument, especially for investors who only really care about where are you going and do we believe you're the people who can take you there. And that's what the analyst community care about. And of course we need to apply resources. And secondly, we build a strategy around that, which cycles around market cycles, economic cycles, etc. And finally, of course, we need to implement what we do. What I want to say now very briefly in this last slide is simple. Quite often we focus on the commercial aspects of what needs to be done. And quite rightly, we need to keep the lights on, we need to keep the business going, we need to keep generating operational revenues and profitability. But in periods of change, we need to focus not so much on our capabilities, although that needs to be rock solid. We need to focus on, as I've said a moment ago, our purpose, where we're going, what our vision is, what our culture is. I heard comments about that this morning, aspects of how we're expected to behave, what the culture is, what the values are. And we're moving our focus towards being able to deliver the vision. Yeah? And the step towards that is all around behavior, which is why we put behavior right in the middle of any change program. Without those change behaviors, and not intellectually engaging with the new behavior, but emotionally engaging with the new behavior. And I heard that word used about quotas earlier on, and now I'm using it about change. Not intellectually saying, yes, it will be different. It's emotionally saying, I get that it will be different and what it will feel like and what my contribution to that can be. So finally, it's building that vision of the future needs to be done at every level. Your personal vision, how you fit in with the vision of the business and your part of the business, and then saying, what are the values and the culture, the behaviors that I need to adopt that will propel me and my career and my income, I imagine, that goes with that, and my satisfaction of being part of the organization, and then adopting those new processes and influencing the market and taking the opportunities that arise as a consequence of this. So I wish you every success in this, and thank you for listening to me.